I'm Emelyn Theriault from Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and I'm a first-time voter.
Emelyn, beyond your civic obligation that you feel to vote in this presidential election, you also have another role that's pretty interesting. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I was given the opportunity to help work at my polling place for the state primary election in September and was offered the same opportunity for this upcoming November election. And that was just like, it wasn't something that I actively sought out, but more was like offered to me. And I'm super appreciative because it really helped educate me about my local community, but also just like really reinforce the importance of voting, especially for young people. And just like a lot of the other workers at the polls are older, so from a different generation. So they also really enjoyed working with some younger kids, and it just helps give a different perspective. And we could just talk about our thoughts on the politics.
Talk to me about that younger perspective and what issues you think are truly important for your generation.
So I think my generation, we're really in tune with social media. So I've seen a lot of posts on my social media from peers just like educating and trying to inform their followers to vote. And I also think that it's very important that these posts aren't too like shallow and that they're actually informed and like aware of the implications of what they're posting and not just posting it to like go with the crowd. Because even while any sign of support is like it's good, it's more beneficial if you really know like the meaning behind those words. So I think that's something for my generation. And also with a lot of like kids my age were in college. So mail-in voting, I'm fortunate that for my first election, I can actually directly vote at my polling place, but a lot of people are doing mail-in. And there's more of like an aspect, like you have to educate yourself on how mail-in voting works, but it's also like super helpful and just helps engage more people if they are unable to go to the polls because of COVID or because of many different reasons.
I really commend you as a younger person being so actively involved in wanting to educate yourself. Where did this political activism kind of start with you? When did you really understand the role that you could play with the election and in our government?
I always went to the polls with my dad, as I'm sure a lot of other kids did with their parents. And my mom, being an immigrant, she wasn't able to vote, so that really just um, made me want to like share my voice. And I think especially with this election, I think you should really vote for the people who don't have a voice. A lot of people feel disillusioned by like the political system, and I think that for those of us young people like myself, if we can use our voice to like try to work towards the world that we want to live in, I think that's really powerful.
Do you have anybody in your immediate circle that is not planning on voting? And if somebody that you know isn't planning on voting, what would you say to them?
Everyone in my immediate circle that I am aware of will be voting, but if I was aware that someone wasn't, I would just remind them of like the importance of their vote and just like every vote matters, like elections have come down to very narrow margins. So I would just remind them like the meaning behind their vote, but at the end of the day it is their choice, but it's a very important right that we have, and some people uh, don't have. So for those of us who can, it's very important.
When we first started talking and you were mentioning about working at the polls, you said that it made you more familiar with your local community. Have you or are you following any local elections that have been happening?
Since then, yeah, I definitely opened my eyes more. Before that, I would say that I wasn't that engaged as much as I maybe would have liked to have been. But definitely that experience opened my eyes. And I know that the election, like last year, it came down, they had to do like a recount. It was very close. And it's just interesting to see, like, and actually, like, since I was able to vote in the last election, it was fun to see like, wow, like my vote matters and just more direct relationship.
So this is the first presidential election that you are able to vote in. What are your expectations and how are you feeling about this?
One difference that I have to prepare for more compared to the primary election is like the questions on the ballot. So just educating myself on, voting yes or no, and also just talking with other people about that, I think will help me form my decision. Um, in terms of like working at the polls, I know it'll be a long day. It was a long day the last time, but I had a good time. And I just hope that there aren't any issues and that it goes by safely and smoothly.
In addition to talking to others to kind of inform yourself about the questions on the ballots, like you had mentioned, what other sources are you using to get your news and stay informed on different topics and issues?
I like to listen to podcasts when I'm just like sitting around or like going for a run. It just like keeps my mind active. Yeah, podcasts or just like news stories. I try to keep like a variety because a lot of them can be biased, but even if you know a source is biased, if you still read it, but you're aware that there is some bias, you can still gain something from that. But I think where things um, people can get misinformation is when they aren't aware that bias exists in those news sources.
How are you deciding on who to vote for?
Well, I think a recent trend in the past couple elections has been more people thinking about who they'd rather vote in opposition to rather than in favor of, which I'm trying to focus more on like the political platforms rather than anything else. And overall, I would just say that it's important to acknowledge the flaws of the two-party system, but just cast a ballot anyways, because that's the only way that we can work towards forming the world that we want to live in and speaking for those have who feel disillusioned or have been disenfranchised by the system.
Now, oftentimes the younger generation sometimes gets a little underestimated with previous generations. Do you feel like your generation is being heard?
Honestly, this was something that crossed my mind when I like that day before working at the polling station because I knew in my experience going with my dad when I was younger, it was always like older people working. So I was like, are they gonna think that like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing, like, or like, but I actually felt really welcomed. Like, and I felt like they cared about what I had to say and could trust like my abilities. Like I knew what I was gonna do what I was responsible for. But I would have to say that some people might feel that they aren't heard by older generations. And there is definitely a gap there, but I think that if we can get younger people to vote at the levels that older generations are, we can make more of a voice for ourselves.